won't be able to
It's
measure
attribution.
Yeah,
and attribution is really hard. And people get their knickers in a knot about attribution because it's like, no, that's my percentage and that's too high. And all of the...
Hello and welcome to episode 231 on the Rockstar CMO effing marketing podcast. It's Saturday the 24th of August and I hope you are well and staying as sane as you feel you need to be. I'm your host Ian Truscott. I'm not a rockstar, but I am a CMO and trusted advisor, and on this show, with the help of my chums, we share marketing street knowledge that I hope will bring out the rockstar marketer in you. Come say hello. You can find us at rockstarcmo.com or Rockstar CMO on LinkedIn. It's Cathy on Content Week as Cathy McKnight returns for our monthly chat about 5 effing content things, and Robert Rose is in our virtual bar with a cocktail and a thought about a realistic strategy. But first, we need to pay the bar tab. I'll be back in a moment.
We'll be right back.
We'll be right back. My dad works in B2B marketing, but I never really knew what that meant. Then one day, my dad came by my school for career day and told everyone in my class he was a big ROAS man. Then he just kept saying things like, the bigger the ROAS, the better, over and over. My friends still laugh at me to this day. I think it means calculating a return on ad spend. One thing's for sure, I'll be known as the ROAS man's kid for the rest of my days. Why couldn't you just be a fireman or a lawyer? Why? You ruined my life, Dad.
Not everyone gets B2B, but LinkedIn has the people who do. And with ads on LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people based on job title, industry, likelihood to buy, and more. Start converting your B2B audience into high-quality leads today. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/MPN to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/MPN. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
Ask your doctor about Air Supra, albuterol budesonide. Eligible patients can pay as little as $0 per inhaler, subject to eligibility rules and maximum savings limits. Restrictions may apply. Visit airsuprasavings.com to learn more.
Right, let's get this started, and welcome back my friend Cathy McKnight, Chief Problem Solver at the Content Advisory. Welcome back, Cathy, to Rockstar CMO FM. How are you?
I'm well, Ian. Thank you.
And normally we normally introduce ourselves and say, for people who haven't listened, tell us about yourself, Cathy. But I think people already know who you are, right?
I think we're well past that, yes.
But you are the Chief Problem Solver at the Content Advisory. How is lovely Toronto at the moment?
Oh, the sun is shining. It has been a weird and wacky summer weather-wise, as I think it has been in most of the world. But I am just back from a week in Glasgow for work, and then landed and was home for an hour, turned around, packed up the car, and left on a week of holiday up at the lake in one of our lake districts. So I am still day 3 back, still relaxed, still reveling that I wish I was on my paddleboard. And the biggest thing on my agenda was whether or not I should finish my book or go for a walk. But alas, reality has hit and I am back into the thick of it.
Well, apologies for being part of the thick of it.
All good.
How is Glasgow? I haven't been for a few years. I mean, it's almost on my doorstep, so I can almost be like, oh, Cassie, we could have met, but we couldn't. It's the other end of the country. It's ridiculous.
Well, yes, if you would have liked to have hopped on a 4-hour train ride to come up and see me, I would have loved to have had dinner with you. Glasgow was surprisingly nice weather, and I was there for client work, and the team over there is just absolutely lovely. So it was a nice week. We got out and did some walkabouts in the after hours, and it was a productive 4 days of meetings. So it was good.
How did you get on with the language? Because I know that there's a big language.
I am so used to it now. There's a few words where I'm like, I'm sorry, what? Mostly I am good with it.
Splendid. All right. Well, let's get cracking with, as you describe it, the thick of it. So this month, we've been collecting together a little few things that we want to catch up on over the months. I'm not doing a very good job of introducing this, but anyway, and we've come up with 5 effing things that have come up in this month. Now, both of us believe that we can't cover 5 effing things in the time that we have available.
No, we can't.
So it could be 3, it could be 2, it could be 1. But we'll kick off. So there's a few things that I wanted to cover. One is we'll start off with, as I just alluded to just a moment ago, you've published a wonderful blog post on the Content Advisory blog about our topic we discussed last month. So we'll touch on that. You've also did a webinar this week just gone. So I'd like to pick your brains on some of the key points that came out of that and ask you if there's a recording so that our listeners can go back and listen to that. And then I saw an interesting thing on LinkedIn. Well, isn't that interesting? Because it's these AI generated things on LinkedIn. And I don't know, they gave me a badge. They said I'm a top content marketing voice. So I keep dipping back into these things. I thought I'd get your opinion on that. And then also, as we're both working in that kind of fractional world, we've seen a lot this month of stuff that's come up about fractional. I thought I'd ask you about that. And then we'll finally end up with budgets because it's budget season and Forrester have talked about. They seem to be bullish on the budget we're going to get for content, and I'd like your opinion there. So those are 5 effing things I'm going to try and cover with you, but I know what we're like. So let's start off with your blog post. It's sink or swim in the deep end of the tech enablement, and it's based on last month's topic. I really like it. What I liked about this is we had a really nice conversation. I encourage listeners to go back and listen to that. But you've actually added some data, which I think is excellent, isn't it? So, and you shared that the Content Marketing Institute 2023 research that 37% of enterprise respondents said they had the technology but aren't using it to its potential, which is exactly the point we were making. They feel ill-equipped to make the most of these technologies. So I don't know what the question is to this, but I wondered, what I was thinking about was, since we had that discussion, you've obviously done some more research. What did you discover?
I mean, Ian, you and I have been in this industry for longer than we both care to admit. And one of the things that we've always just scratched our head about is when we've helped organizations through the years select technology, sometimes the reason is fair. It's, it's spaghetti code, they can't upgrade it anymore, or it was homegrown and it's time for, a real solution, so to speak. But often the technology that they have would do what they're looking for it to do. Yes. They're looking for the bright and shiny, and over again. I mean, this is not statistically valid. I have not done any research, but I think on the outside, companies are using 40% maybe of the capability that they have in the individual technologies. Some more than others. There's going to be some where because it's a simple point solution, they're using 80%, 90%. But when we're talking about big, CMSs, DXPs, whatever the acronym is you want to use, or digital asset management systems, they're really not maximizing the return on their investment by truly digging into what it has to offer. And so this is something you and I have been talking about for a long time. And I just found it really interesting that in today's day and age, it's still a thing. Now, what we're finding, Robert and I at the Content Advisory is we don't get the call is often saying, hey, can you help us choose insert 3-letter acronym of a technology here? If they're looking to add or change something up in their stack, it is sometimes now, which is very refreshing, saying, can you help us understand if we really do need something new? Or do we have, what aren't we using? One of our clients right now is going through a massive tech audit. And we're not just talking MarTech, it's across the organization with the goal of optimizing and consolidating where they can. Now, are they doing it the way I would do it? Absolutely not, because they have the people who are running the project are not technologists, and they're making a lot of assumptions. And sometimes there is going to be overlap, and that's just the way it is. It's not about, okay, well, if it's here, we can't have it anywhere else. And that's right now, that's sort of how they're approaching. I'm hoping that changes as it goes forward. But honestly, companies need to sit back and reflect before they add something new or take something out or replace something to see if they can't do with what they have.
Yeah, I'm reassured by that, actually, because we have spent so long trying to advocate for people to have these tech audits. I mean, obviously, when I've worked in vendors, I haven't, but as a consultant, as an advisor, I certainly have. And I'm reassured to hear that you've got big clients doing that, because because I think as a marketer in a large organization, there is budget lying around that you can cut some of these systems, consolidate some of your technology, and then use that as some of your frontline budget to get shit done.
Absolutely.
I think that's perfect. That's wonderful. So that was your article, and your article's on the contentadvisory.net blog. And like I say, it's called It's Sink or Swim in the Deep End of the Tech Enablement Pool. I'll include a link to it in the show notes. So let's move on to, I think this is probably going to be the bigger topic of the 5 that we're going to talk about. And that is the webinar that you've just done. And Robert was on the show week before last, I think. And he was also broke this into a 2-part conversation. You know that we have a little chat in the bar, and it's normally quite short. He's like, I think this is going to go on for a couple of weeks. And it was that theme that you guys were talking about, which is the theme of your webinar, the title of your webinar is Breaking Up with Your Website, Content Modeling for Amazing in capitals, Customer Experiences. I love this notion of breaking up with your website, and also that's what Robert was talking about. So I'm going to ask, out of that webinar, and I very much enjoyed watching you two, why do we need to break up with our websites, Cathy?
So I think what we need to do, and this is just an example of it, is we need to stop thinking about content as an asset first initiative. Mm-hmm. And I think we touched on this on an earlier conversation. I'm not sure if it was last time or in another episode of Rockstar, but
or in the pub,
or in the pub. Actually, it might have been in the pub because I just saw you in June. In that, this whole notion and focus and obsession and all of that of the velocity of content and hyper personalization and the amount of content that you need for that, I think is somewhat misguided, in that it's not that you need an insurmountable amount and number of pieces of content. Is what you need is the right components to build the content to be personalized. And that's where breaking up with the website sort of handle or topic came into it, is that rather than write content for the website, right? So rather than start with, okay, we're going to build a microsite, or we need a new website for our brand or whatnot, it's content needs to start with the audience. Who is it that you're trying to reach? Why is it that you want to or need to reach them? And what are you solving for them? Are you giving them information? Are you trying to make them feel, do, or think? And why? So if we reconfigure our thought process and start with, the objective of reaching a customer for a specific reason, then that enables us to create content and then build or produce the assets to best deliver what they are looking for and create the engagement or the conversion or the informing or the education, whatever it is that they're looking for. So if we step away from what it's going to be when it grows up and start with what it needs to be from a foundation, it truly, the customer experience can't help but be overhauled and improved.
Yeah. So is this like, so it used to be years ago, there was a joke like insert content here, right? Is that people would want to create the website, and the website was the project rather than what you're trying to achieve with the customer. Right?
Correct.
And then content would come last. But this is a content, didn't we used to talk about content first? This is a content first strategy, but specifically, is this also about the customer needs first strategy? So what is it that these folks need from us, particularly as these days in content marketing, we want to be helpful, right? So is that how we're starting to think about this in terms of what's in the content, not just that we're creating content for the sake of it?
Absolutely. It's the whole inside out paradigm, right? It's about not starting with, as an organization, what do we want to say? What do we want to tell them? What do we want them to think? What do we, being the company, insert whatever it is here, but rather, okay, so who is our customer? So that's the first thing, is the number of organizations who don't truly understand who their audiences and consumers are is gobsmacking. They think they know, but they really don't. And then who are they? And then what is it that they're looking for? What do they need? what gets them excited? How do we engage with them on their level, in their time, contextually, etc.? And you can't, if you're thinking about it from an interior, from a self-motivating perspective, then you're never going to get it right, because the old adage of you got to walk a mile in somebody's shoes. That's for content. That's exactly it.
Yeah. So that's the emotion and the passion and what we're trying to create, right? And that's understanding our customers' needs and how best to serve them. But I know you, Cathy, it's also about process and governance, but how do we get this shit done, right? So how does that impact our approach to content and its in production? And what are you seeing with clients with this?
One of the things we are helping majority of our content clients with is just that, is getting them to rethink their process. So, right. The typical, and I put in the air quotes, process for content creation is ideate, create, produce, and publish, right? And they conflate, they put together the create and produce becomes one step. They don't think about it separately. And what we're trying to get them to do is do more work at the front end. So at the ideate stage is not just letting that sit with, product marketing or with brand or with customer engagement or, insert whatever the team name is here, that events. But it's about bringing that source and the generation of content into an informed group that understands the customer, understands the channel, understands content, best practices, SEO, creation, production. And so with the starting point of, okay, here's the audience we want to reach.
Yeah.
Here's why we want to reach them. And by the way, it doesn't have to be altruistic, solely serving the need of the customer, right? It can be, we want them to know about X. But if you don't start with the customer and understand who they are and, why it would be important to them from that perspective, you can't actually reach them. So again, it's always got to start, even if it's a self-serving brand perspective, which is going to be, right?
I had this conversation the other day where somebody was talking about buyer personas and they were saying, you've got to understand everything about them. I said, no, I don't. I just need to understand the part of the needs they have that I can help them with. I don't need to know what fucking newspaper they read or any of that stuff. I don't even need to know their gender. None of that business profile stuff. I just need to, and where's that quid pro quo? I can help them and they will hopefully engage with us, become aware and trustworthy, and then they might buy from us. That's why we're here.
Exactly. So, and in order to do that, and in order to be able to deliver that goodness and the smarts and the creativeness and whatnot in the right way, is understanding what are the content components. So, is the video, and if you're going to do a video, do you need transcripts? Do you want B-reel? What are all the individual, if we think about it in a recipe format, what are all the individual ingredients that we're going to need in order to produce the output, the assets, to reach the different audiences in the different channels at the different times in a best way possible. And if you start with, let's create a website, let's do a research paper, let's do an infographic, well, you're not going to get anywhere, right? So separate the content from the production of the delivery mechanism, whatever that asset may look like.
The amount of times I've heard, like, oh, we need more video, or we need to be on tick face, or we need
more cowbell. Sorry.
Yeah, that's how we. We need more cowbell. I'm totally stealing that. I'm going to use that in one of my Tuesday tweets. So need more cowbell. I love it. And then, so I'd give you an example. So with my largest client at the moment, we identified there's a challenge with, and it's for every B2B technology vendor probably, is you're competing with do nothing or not now or delayed, and they're current. And I wrote about it on my Tuesday 2 sentences. There's that pain. And so what we did is I just wrote a brief which said, this is the people we're trying to reach. This is the story we want to tell. And we didn't even think about, at this point, I just discarded any thought about how we were going to do that. And so then that just generates ideas, and somebody in the team will say, oh, I can write a blog post on this, or we can do a research piece on this, or I know somebody who can, and it generates a much better start to the creative process, rather than being constrained as we need an ebook about do nothing, or we need, a tick face or a video or something like, it's just, anyway. Yeah.
Well, and it's also in that initial creative discussion. So when the brief is being generated, that it's not done in a vacuum. So bring in the people who understand. So bring in the creatives, right? Bring in the people who write, bring in the people who design, bring in the people who know SEO, bring in the people who know channel, so that you don't get so far down the path that it's too late to turn back, or you haven't done something. Or these are the people who are staying up and current on, what's hot, what's not, what's falling out of fashion, etc. in their area and discipline. So there may be some hot, new, amazing thing that you and I wouldn't know about because we're not creatives, we're not designers. So if you bring them in early, it really helps you be on that cutting edge, bleeding edge, and differentiating. Yeah.
Also, part of that team should be somebody who actually understands the customer.
No. Yes. 100%.
A startup I'm working with, they've got the guy that looks after all the customers. We run everything by him. He's a bit of an old curmudgeon. Hopefully he doesn't listen to this. But he's amazing, because it's just like, no, they won't care about that. And you've got this whole lovely marketing fluffy, and it's very grounding. And so you should always have somebody who represents the customer in any of these things, because you go off on a flight of fancy and you're like, nah, they won't care about that, mate, not at all. So that neatly actually segues onto the next topic, because you were talking about getting it done and the people that we need to get it done. And I think one of the things that I've noticed, well, I noticed it a lot, but also noticed this month since we chatted, and I know you guys have a big opinion about this because this is services you guys offer, is it seems like there's a big drive towards the word fractional.
Yes.
I'm also a fractional CMO, and I'm wondering whether this whole fractional thing is losing a bit of its luster, like marketing buzzwords that we kill. But it does seem to me that there's something in this, and certainly, I'm working with a client. We've kind of put together a portfolio of specialists to help them rather than hire a team, because that's what they need right now, right? So is that your experience too? What are you seeing in this whole fractional market expertise?
So we're actually doing a fair bit of that ourselves, and it can be really, really helpful. So depending on the size of the organization, the stage that they're in, certainly from a startup perspective, where what you need in your first, 3, 6, 9 months is different from what you need in the 6, 9, 12 months, et cetera, as you grow, as you mature, as thing gets established. So rather than try and find the people who know a little bit about it all and can do it sort of partially, why not hire the people? Sometimes you just click with someone and they're the person that you want to be your CMO or your CFO or whatever it is. But maybe they're missing something. Maybe they've never done a startup before. Maybe there's this very, niche, unique thing that you're looking for. Well, bring somebody in who gets it and understands it and can educate the team along the way, right? Can fill the gap and then transfer the skills that are needed, not necessarily all of them, so that the team has that foundation moving forward. And we've, a lot of times needs do not align with budget cycles. I'm sure you've never heard that before. And so fractional ownership there, or fractional talent there, is an excellent way of filling the gap, because that often comes from a different budget, right? So you can get the skill set you need while you're trying to hire someone, while you're looking for that right fit. Then you don't feel the pressure to hire just because you need someone now. You can find the right hire. You can test it. Is that really the skill set that we want to focus on? Because sometimes it's not. Sometimes you think and then you hire, and then you go, oh crap, what I really needed was X. Well, now you have an FTE that you can't fire because they're good at what they do, but it's just not what you're looking for.
Yeah. And I also think that, a couple of points there you made, I think, as well, is that you get a huge amount of experience for the same price as a mid-market or a mid-level or maybe up a junior, right? It depends on how many days you've got with them.
And sometimes that's what you need. And I also think what I've found in my experience is you're able to help them hire better, become a better, and also be a better client for their agencies and all that, just to bring them up a little bit, because they don't know what they don't know sometimes, right? Or we don't know what we don't know when we're working with people. And so I think that's a good part of it, isn't it? Especially if you're either a startup or you're in a transition or you're fresh CMO and you're in a turnaround, is get that little injection of pure experience. I kind of like that analogy.
Well, and not only that too, when you think about it, there are some organizations, there's some industries where there's seasonal swings, right? Where you need like a concentration of something for 3 months at a certain part of the year, and then really it's a trickle, right? So you can get the fractional excellence that you need, the talent that you need at the caliber that you need for that short time, and then great, you know what? Then either you put them on retainer for less during the year, or it's just a cyclical thing. Product launches, events, those are all things that are concentrated skill sets that you only need. Some of the skill sets are only needed for a short period of time. Well, great, if you want to bring that on and train someone on your team to be that person when it's needed. But if it's really that one-off part of the year or specific, then again, it's an excellent opportunity to bring in the best that you can for what you need at the time. And then, it's all good moving forward.
Yeah. And we're, and I don't want to bring a downer to it, because we are wonderfully Pollyanna about this, and we've seen the positivity, and you've been part of the positivity without tooting our own horns about this kind of stuff. But do you think right now there's a lot of talk about fractional because there's a lot of people on the market?
Absolutely.
Because it does seem to be there's been a lot of cutbacks and downsizing. And I'm getting a sense, I had this conversation the other day, there's like almost a quiet recession going on inside marketing teams at the moment. And that's also, I mean, it's wonderful about this fractional stuff, but it seems like, flexible labor is great. But, do you think that there seems to be some sort of caution now within marketing budget, which is why not only are the cutbacks happening, but people are not committing to employees, they're bringing in consultants. What's your view of where the market is at the moment?
So all really good points, and absolutely you can't be all sunshines and unicorn. I think marketing and communications have been two of the areas within enterprise that have been absolutely decimated over the last few years with cutbacks and realignments and whatnot during budget, shrinkage. And because again, there are two parts of the organization where unless you do or understand what marketing and content and communications does and the impact on your business, anybody can do it, right? Oh, I can write the email. Oh, I'm a designer. I've got a really good flair with color, et cetera, et cetera. They don't understand that it's a skilled profession and that it is critical to have the people that you need. And part of the challenge, and I don't think we as marketers did ourselves any favors, is that we got so niche, and I say we as a collective, not you and I necessarily, so niche in our skill set. So the marketing teams, when we think about skills from a capital letter T, the crossbar at the top became super wide, but the long part of the T was really, really short. So there was depth of knowledge in very, very tailored, very, very specific skill sets. So when you went to do, backfill or promotion or growth, it's like, I don't do that, or I don't know how to do that. Then it totally opened the door for anybody looking at the analysis of the people and what they're contributing and go, no. You know what? You only do that. You're gone. But it left a huge gap. And then filling it with fractional became easy. I think it's a bit of a cheater way. I think there's a lot of organizations who are trying to keep, to not do the expensive part of hiring and having FTEs, as in benefits and training and growth and investment in them. And they're throwing stuff. It's throwaways. Like we're almost being treated a little bit like disposable items. which isn't good for the organization because marketers get better and better the deeper and more they understand your company. And if you are constantly turning people over and don't have that baseline for growth, then again, you're missing out.
I also think it's almost part of the post-COVID remote flexibility working thing as well. And I think that we're in a discipline that you don't need to show up to the office every day in order to make a huge contribution to the business. And I wonder if that's also related to it, that actually there's some choice with people. They're like, well, I don't need to go to the office every day. I can become fractional. I can do this consulting thing. So I think there's some push-pull on this if I'm going to I'll try and end on a positive. Right? So I think it's suiting a lot of people to work in this way. But I also think it's not seeing a lot of people. And I think that a lot of people are describing themselves as fractional right now simply because there isn't the full-time work around. Because there's shrinkage in the market.
You're spot on there. And in terms of the people who are like, well, I don't want to go to the office 5 days a week, so I'm going to go fractional. Those of us who are a little longer in the tooth, I think that's okay because we've had the benefit of office environments. We understand them. We've learned. We get it. We also know the value and appreciate the value. For those people who are earlier on in their career and really haven't had that opportunity, they don't know what they're missing. So I'm not saying they don't.
No.
I'm not dissing them at all. But when you haven't experienced it, you don't know what you're missing. And it's the opportunistic learning, that bottom of the knowledge iceberg that is inaccessible remotely. It just is. They're missing out on so much.
Oh, absolutely. And you've got to be so disciplined with the tools at your disposal, like Slack or whatever it is you're using, and try and treat that like in person, try and create some of that serendipity and build an open culture virtually. And that's quite difficult compared to being in the office. And I'm the same as you, Cathy, right? We're of the same vintage almost exactly, right? And I think that if you think about the things that we've gained through our careers, the people we've met, maybe the people we've married, have come through that, but also the mentors that we've had and all that stuff. I like a few days in the office. I also like a few days in the office too. So right now, 100% virtual isn't for me. 100% in the office isn't for me. And like you say, I think young people or people earlier in their careers can benefit from just being around.
Absolutely. Yeah. I go back to our first conversation about Glasgow. I absolutely loved being in my client's office from 8:30 in the morning until 5:30 at night. I loved it. It was amazing. I mean, the energy and, people were saying, this is great because everybody's here, because not everybody is always there. And it makes a difference. It draws people in when there's other people there and the conversations you can have.
Yeah. Oh, this is a rabbit hole we could definitely dive down. And, one of the things I think about is when you're in the office and you have a meeting, the meetings always start 5 or 10 minutes late because everybody's having a cup of coffee, they're having a chat, they're grabbing a donut, whatever. And yet, when we have virtual meetings, we start on the dot. And if you're sitting in the meeting just on your own before everybody arrives, but for a minute, it feels like an eternity, right? And so you lose that social, whatever it's called, don't you, at that beginning of the meeting. All right, so that's now I need to bring this back. So this had a coherent flow, these 5 things, but now I'm going to have to bring back to the topic that both of us actually chipped in on in the end, I think. So you offer me a badge, and I'm a sucker for it, to be honest with you. And so LinkedIn are doing, what do they call these? Community articles, which is basically training their AI probably to do us all out of a job. I don't know what it's there for, but they have these articles that you can contribute to, and I'm sure everybody's seen those, and I kind of dip into those. And then one of them that I saw, and I'll include a link to it in the show notes, of course, was a discussion about content marketing measurement. And I saw some advice about, you need to connect it to how many SQLs you're getting and connect it to revenue. And I was like, no, you need to think like a publisher. Content is about reach and awareness and building trust and all those things. Other marketing, and absolutely as marketers, we should be revenue focused. Don't get me wrong. I've got my awareness, revenue and trust thing for a reason. Revenue's there. But what did you think of that? Because I know that you then looked at the same conversation, had a little chip in. What do you think of that?
So measurement's got to be contextual. And it's one of the challenges that, again, we work with a lot of our clients on is again, I go back to our conversation about, breaking up with your website and the whole idea of content modeling and starting with the customer. And if you start with your customer, and one of the things with the client I was in Glasgow with, actually, that we're trying to move to is the intake form for content will have only who's the audience you're trying to reach, what is it that you're trying to tell them, like what's the why behind the content that you're asking for, and how is success going to be measured, right? So context is critical, and all measurement should be around the context of why the content is being created. And you're absolutely right. I mean, you need to be able to prove the value and what it's doing, but if you're putting out a piece there strictly in the whole intent was a feel good, want people to like go, when they read it, that is purposeful content. Are you going to get direct conversions out of it? Probably not, right? But eventually,
you will, but you just won't be able to measure
attribution. And attribution is really hard, and people get their knickers in a knot about attribution because it's like, no, that's my percentage, and that's too high, and all of the things. But if you start off with clear, Robert and I are huge fans of OKRs, objectives and key results. And if you start off with a few of those, super clear, very defined, make it smart around them, the whole, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time bound, then you'll get the results, you'll get the data that you need. Now, whether it's the results you wanted or not, that's TBD, right? And the other thing is not, part of the key results, it's not just about identifying the key results, it's what are you going to do with them? So who's the owner and what's the action that needs to be taken? Sometimes it's and if the action is we're just watching because we're curious, that's okay, but you need to predefine that. You can't make that decision after you get the results and go, oh yeah, well, we didn't want anything from it anyways because, just based on the results. So who owns it and what are you going to do about it? Whether it's going the way you want, whether it's not going the way you want. So it's so much more than just saying, okay, this is what we're going to measure. You're going to measure it, who owns it, and what are you going to do about it?
Yeah, and why is that measurement important? What I'd really like, actually, just a little segue, going back to something we were discussing just a minute ago, that content intake form, those things, right? I love the way that wasn't, I'd like an ebook. The way that you've structured those three questions obviously is perfect from what we were just talking about. And because I've been in those situations, and this is what you don't want your content team to become, is like short order cooks. There's like, oh, I'm producing a PDF this week. That's so demoralizing. So I think what you're doing there is really cool. And that leads on to measurement, that is the entire brief, isn't it? What am I trying to achieve and how am I going to measure it? I think that's perfect. Yes. So whereas my take on this thing was think like a publisher, your take is, well, if you want to be a publisher kind of thing, isn't it? It's the context of what you want to be. So I think it's perfect. All right. So that's measurement. And then that wasn't, I think it still segues into it's budget season. So me and Jeff last week were talking about budgets a lot, and we've got 5 effing things for creating a budget. But there was an article that caught my eye on Forrester where they're actually bullish about content and creative spend, which I was surprised to read. I'll be honest with you, because particularly in the light of some of the discussions you and I have been having, and so I don't record video, but Cathy is shaking her head quite vehemently. So, can I guess your take on this? I mean, their 3 takeaways on this were kind of bleeding obvious. Was digital continues to dominate. Is there anything else? What are they? What are we going to go back? I don't know. Corporate events reflected something of decisions.
Dichotomy?
That word, I don't know why. And advertising.
Dichotomy?
Dichotomy, that's the word I'm searching for. And advertising budgets at risk. Now, well, the first point, digital continues to dominate, of course it will. But what did you think about the point they were making about, well, in general, but also about this point about events? I know you go to a lot of events and star at a lot of events. Are you seeing it come back?
So yeah, events have come back. They're different though. And what and listen, there are a lot of really smart people at Forrester. So, they're not making this stuff up. I don't know who they sent this survey to. I didn't get into the details of the survey. I was surprised, as you were, on this, because we are not seeing that. I am not seeing an increase. Marketers are still talking about budget cuts. We get in with organizations and we make plans and recommendations, whether it is actual like content itself that we're building, whether it is hiring for the team. And often partway through the path, mid-year review, it's like they just slashed our budget. Mm-hmm. And great for those who, if it's happening, fantastic. Mm-hmm. But even at events, I go to a lot of events. And like you said, I speak at a lot of them. And one thing I have noticed, even, amazing events, is that there is absolutely budget cut happening. Whether it is the number of people, staff per person, right? So the staff is lower. This sounds trite, but the food being offered and served, the branding that has taken place, so the huzzah of the event.
Yes.
It's definitely changed, and it's definitely lower from that perspective. Yet events are still, some of them are still trying to get bigger and bigger and bigger. So it is absolutely a dichotomy of expectation and what they're willing to put into it.
Yeah, and really I should learn to say the word.
Well, you just did. Look at that.
You're quite right. Yeah, look at that. But also, I mean, that article, and I include a link to it. The other thing is it's actually, I'm not naming and shaming, but it's Karen Tran, the principal analyst, Ian Bruce, who I've met a few times, who, as you say, I'm a big fan of Forrester, and I think Ian Bruce is a particularly good analyst. So it'll be interesting to dig into this. So I'll include a link to it in the show notes. But their big takeaways was about the fact that the higher budget seem to be coming in, providing personalised and targeting assets and thought leadership. And I'm not quite sure that that's true either. But anyway, it's worth a look into that. So I'll include a link to that. But that might be some good news. Forrester are bullish about content creative spend in 2025. So yay! And maybe they'll hire more fractional people, and maybe all the things we've just been talking about will come true. So I think that's fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Cathy. Those were our 5 effing things for this month. What have you got coming up?
Well, I do my weekly Uncharted journeys. So I've just dropped my last 2 would have been Leslie Greenwood of Wednesday Women. Amazing women networking community that is really just focused on connections and encouraging success and whatnot. Yeah. They're about to have their anniversary, or just had actually. So that's exciting. She's amazing. So tune in to unchartedjourneys.net and check out some of those episodes. And I'm planning just about at my 100th episode. So trying to figure out what to do there. And then as I mentioned, have
a man on. No, I'm joking. Don't have a man on.
No, that would ruin
it. And that Wednesday women thing. Sorry, I just want to big you up a little bit. Yeah. I love your show, as you know, and I'm always talking about Uncharted Journeys, and I'm always referring anybody who's got an interesting story who happens to be a woman, I'm always sending them your way. And that Wednesday Women there's a big thing on LinkedIn on that you can. I follow it because I interviewed, and it's really bad, I can't remember who it was, but I've also interviewed somebody who's part of that Wednesday Women movement, one of the founders of that too, and that's got some momentum.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah,
it's phenomenal, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, so that's your Uncharted Journey.
Well, conference season is soon upon us. So September, Dreamforce and Macon, and then we'll talk about those other ones in the September. We'll talk about October. So just getting back into the swing of things, and traveling is upping. So hopefully the COVID cases will get resolved and down, and I can stay healthy.
Nice, yeah, and I was going to talk about what's coming up for me. And so on the topic of content things, I'm appearing on a panel for our mutual friends at Storyblock. I know we've both, we both enjoy that particular vendor in London on the 3rd of September. You might have seen something on LinkedIn. I've talked about that. I made a really shitty video. I tried. They asked me to make a video, and I think it's shitty. I don't know whether everybody else thinks it's shitty, but I used Loom, and it was my first time using Loom, and so there's just my little head in the corner, and that's it. I was embarrassed by that, but anyway, at least I had a go. And also, did you see that Dean Barker looks like he's resurrecting CM Pros, which is a very inside baseball thing to talk about, but I thought I'd ask you.
Yes.
Are you interested? Are you excited about it?
We'll see. He and I talked about doing a content certification thing many, many years ago. And then I was actually in discussions with somebody else to do it as well. I believe they've teamed up a little bit on it. It's interesting. I'm not having been a part of the discussions, I'm not sure what exactly they're trying to do in terms of, CM Pros was content management professionals getting together and geeking out all on that. So I think there is still such a divergence on approach and beliefs and the evolution of our practice. It isn't a one way is the right way. So I would love to, I'll reach out to Dean and engage with him and see what it's all about. But I guess it's something to watch. We'll see. Hopefully they're not just dipping into the same, pool of people they know, that they've branched out and bringing in some new blood and new thoughts. But
I bet you know some great clients who would be wonderful at that. But I should have explained the inside baseball part, that content management pros used to be, and this is 10 years ago, used to be quite a prominent industry organization. I was a director there for a little while. I witnessed its death, basically, because the social media overtook the membership kind of organizations, and it just didn't evolve well enough with it. But yes, I think it's interesting. Anyway, and I think we need it, don't we, in the content management industry, although I'm not in it anymore, but it's, I think it's a good thing. All right. So thank you very much, Cathy. And will you join me again in a month's time? Absolutely. And we'll pick on 5.
I love it. I love the shift to the 5 effing things.
Yeah. I also love the fact that we've got all 5 done. I mean, I don't know whether we did them in enough depth and whether the listener has actually managed to catch any of the things we said, but we did it.
You know what? We encourage listeners to give us some feedback on that. Let us know. Want to know more on something?
Oh, absolutely.
Have an idea, a topic that you want us to cover in our 5 effing things, and reach out to either one of us and we'll tackle it.
Thank you very much, Cathy. As long as it's vaguely about content, as this slot is Cathy on content, then we're up for it. But then we'll talk about anything that you and me have got an opinion about most things.
Well, very good. Thanks for having me on and getting in.
You're very welcome. Thank you very much, Cathy.
Cheers.
Good to see you.
Thank you, Cathy. And as you heard, Cathy will be back with 5 effing things on content next month. And if you have any suggestions for topics we should dive into, all of our contact details, as well as links to the stories we discussed, are in the show notes at rockstarcmo.com. Right, it's that time of the week to retire to the Rockstar CMO virtual bar for a cocktail and a chat with my chum and Cathy's colleague at the Content Advisory, Robert Rose.
Good evening, Robert. What are you drinking?
Oh, hello, and wow. I have not seen this kind of music and setting for since my dad was alive. So a 50s sock hop, I guess, is what you'd call this. Is 1950s. You've got some Elvis, I guess, going on in the background there. A little bit of 50s music. You've got people in poodle skirts here. You've got the whole. Wow, it's a whole 50s scene, man. It's like Happy Days. It's like Happy Days, the TV series. I'm waiting for Fonzie to come out and say hey to us. So, it always amazes me what you can do with the bar and these amazing sounds that you tend to get. I don't know where you're going to find all of this, but
I don't know either. Happy Day.
I am assuming you will find it.
That's next Saturday. Screwed up. That's fine. And funny enough, I did see Henry Winkler in a hotel in London a little while ago. So there is a connection.
Did you really?
There. Yeah. So I'll have to.
He's a lovely, lovely man.
I didn't speak to him. I'm shy when I see celebrities. I don't
I got the pleasure of meeting him once at a theater. He was attending a play that somebody that we knew was also in, and he was there, and there was a sort of opening night sort of gathering, and he was there, and ended up chatting with him for literally 45 seconds or something. But he was, and he's known as being a lovely, lovely man, and he was indeed a lovely.
It was like holding court in a hotel, and I was trying to recognize the people around him as, was that guy in Happy Days? Isn't that guy? And all that kind of stuff. But I didn't go up to him. But yes. He appears to be a very nice man from what I saw.
Yes. Appearances can be deceiving, however.
That's true.
I have quite a few celebrity stories that end the other way.
That's California. I mean, you're Hollywood, right? So you're tripping over him every other day. So I don't.
That's right.
Up in Oxford.
That's right. I mean, although I will say one of my favorite horrible celebrity. The only time anyone has ever said, "Don't you know who I am?" Really? Which of course is the cliche, right? Mm-hmm. But actually a celebrity did say that to me. But it was in Washington, D.C. It was a politician. It was an American politician, a congressman back in the 90s when I lived in Washington, D.C. with my wife. Yeah. And we came out of a restaurant and we were waiting for the valet parking, and he came up and cut in line for the valet, going to the valet parking. And I mentioned it to him, and he turned around and glared at me, and I recognized him. I knew who he was. Mm-hmm. And he said, "Don't you know who I am?" And I said, "No, and I don't care." So, anyway, that's
I think that's the story. I think that's the perfect response to politicians, because to be ignored and not known is probably the biggest insult you can probably give them. What? Who are you?
Yeah, right. Yeah. Do I care?
All right. So while we're ignoring celebrities,
while we're talking about celebrities, we have a lovely cocktail tonight. A classic for you, because it actually contains the one liquor you have in your cabin, which is gin. And this one, by the way, calls for, and by the way, the UK known for gin, by the way. So it's not like you can't find a good gin in the UK. You probably find better gin in the UK than you can anywhere else in the world, really.
We're swimming in it.
Yeah, so to speak. Yeah. This is called the Dorchester. I don't know if you've familiar with this drink. Yeah,
I'm familiar with the hotel.
Well, there you go. Yes, this is there you go. That the Dorchester. The drink itself was originated apparently in San Francisco.
Oh, okay.
And it's an interesting cocktail. It starts with gin, of course. However you like, 2 ounces, 1.5 ounce, whatever your, 4 fingers, whatever it is however you measure your gin. And then you put in a little bit of maraschino liqueur, a little bit of lime juice, a little bit of grapefruit juice. And so, freshly squeezed, as always, as we always do here in the bar. And that's it. It's very simple. Oh, so you put all that into a shaker, put your lime juice, your grapefruit juice, your maraschino liqueur, and your English gin into a shaker, shake it, and strain it into a wonderful glass with no other ice in it. It should, look like a very chilled martini. You can put a garnish in if you want to make it pretty, but that's the Dorchester. It's nice. Lovely.
I've not tried one of those. I think yes, the maraschino liqueur isn't something liqueur. I haven't.
No, it's a pretty specialized liqueur, for sure. Yeah. But you can make the sort of casual version of this with literally just gin, lime juice, and grapefruit juice. And shake that up as well, and put a cherry in if you can find a maraschino cherry or something like that to, if you want to do that. But the maraschino liqueur sort of gives it a nice twist.
Yes, and I think gin goes very nicely with lime as well. So I think that sounds lovely. So we're sipping these Dorchesters. Very classy indeed. Where are we going to?
Indeed. It's one of my favorite hotels in London. Yes. For sure.
Oh, so we'll be going to the Dorchester? Oh, very nice.
That's where we were going to go. Okay. I think you gotta, when in Rome.
Yeah.
And so I figure we go to the Dorchester. Nice. We order Dorchesters, right?
So the hushed tones in this very classy environment.
Indeed.
And conversation as usual.
Very hushed tones of the Dorchester. Yes.
Turns to marketing. What are we talking about, Rob?
Yeah, absolutely. And we have to put on our best posh accent, right? Because,
Absolutely, oh boy.
Yes. People in waistcoats and all those sorts of things.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about why the optimal isn't in all cases. And what I mean by that is, so I've spent my life in strategy consulting for the most part of it. And strategists and consultants and or people who put together big idea plans, we often get a bad rap, right? Mm-hmm. And sometimes we deserve it, by the way, but sometimes we don't. And, the cliche, right? The cliche of strategy consulting or setting a strategy is, you've heard the cliche before. It's like, you measure the strategy by how loud a thump it makes when you drop it on a desk, or, you measure it in inches, how thick it is, how much it sits on the bookshelf. But the reason that cliche sort of exists is because, typically the strategist or the consultant or whoever it is comes in and recommends a strategy that quite simply can't be implemented, right? Mm-hmm. And the reasons vary for it, right? The proposed change might be too complex, it might be too disruptive, it might be too expensive, or it's just so lengthy that it makes it impractical, or it's just honestly overwhelming. And so even if there's, the typical crawl, walk, run approach, even then management can look at the recommended strategy and go, that's just, how are we ever going to do that? Or is it going to work? Or the team may not be excited about it, and so they're not behind it. Or it all just seems so different than what they're doing today that it just, like, the value of it, like, really? This is what we're going to do now? And so that's the real, it's a real thing. And it is, and we've seen it, all of us have seen it in one varying degree or another. And the key is that, when we get there, the business team or whoever the client is in that case will say, well, they didn't really understand the realities of our situation, or maybe they didn't even understand the assignment, or, whatever it may be. And then the consulting or the strategist on the other side is going, well, they don't get it. The client doesn't get it. They weren't ready for the optimal strategy. And that's the word, right? There's the key word there is optimal, because in both situations, both sides are both right and they're both wrong. The author of the strategy, again, whether it's a consultant or an internal person, they probably didn't understand the full realities because they haven't been there for years and years and years. And the team probably is unable to take this big a change with it. And by the way, it's neither the fault of the buyer or the seller of this strategy, because honestly, nobody, like the client calling up an agency saying, hey, listen, here's the thing. We need a strategy, but can you make it sub-optimized? Because we're really not ready to take on an optimal strategy, said no client ever, right?
Yeah, we're a little bit shit. Can we have just the
that's right. Can we have something that's strategy quite optimized, but really is like 4 steps back from optimal, right? Because that's kind of where we're at, right?
Yeah.
And so neither does can you imagine a consultant marketing themselves like, we don't give you optimal, we give you suboptimal because you can do that. Right. So
like you.
Yeah, exactly. So the mistake that gets made so often is assuming that the optimal strategy that's delivered is the finish line, not the starting line. And so, in other words, unchanged, it's it's often seen as like, that's it, right?
Yeah.
Rather than what good enough, or what good enough version of that would actually be better, when optimal isn't better. And we talk about this a lot in the idea of, how do you get people behind what it is you're going to do? I'll give you an example. I worked with a technology team, marketing team of 30 at a technology company recently, and basically they had brought in 2 new leaders, right? Somebody for demand gen, somebody on the brand side. And basically they both got together as 2 new leaders and said, hey, we're going to upend everything and we're going to create this new strategy and organization and activities. And they sort of tried to implement it with a top-down approach. this is the part where the narrator comes into the documentary and goes, it didn't turn out very well, So basically when they asked me to review like what to do and what happened, I looked at the strategy and it was like, it's beautiful. It's an optimal strategy. What they had was right, but they couldn't execute on it. And the reason because people weren't ready for an entirely new way of working, right? They just, the culture wouldn't allow for it. It's the perfect example of the whole culture eats strategy for breakfast thing. And where people mistake the culture eats strategy for breakfast mentality. By the way, Peter Drucker never said it. But the whole culture eats strategy for breakfast thing is taken to mean that culture is in the way of good optimized strategy. When actually it's the other way around. What Drucker meant when he didn't say the quote, but he actually expressed the idea very often, is that culture is so important so as you should optimize your strategy against it. And in some cases, what that means is that we should back off. In other words, you develop the right strategy, and then what you do is you look at the culture and you optimize or sub-optimize, as the case may be, your perfect optimal strategy so as to make it pragmatic and easier and obtainable by the culture that exists. And you slowly put that in so that it actually takes root and becomes the new habit, becomes the new culture. And there's a number of ways to look at doing that. And we've certainly been on the right side of things of that with our clients, on the wrong side of things by that. But the point being that starting with the optimal strategy isn't the right idea. It's getting to the optimal strategy and then taking the second step, which is to really understand how to apply it to the existing culture that exists.
And this is so true. Because I've seen a number of iterations of this sort of thing. One of on the better, that idea of being pragmatic. So working with a client and we're sort of redeveloping their messaging and their website and all that kind of stuff. And the way that we're going about it, because we have to phase it, is it's less shit than it was yesterday. It's basically the watchword of, we're not going to get to optimum right away. We're going to move forward in these stages, but it's better than it was yesterday. It's kind of the way that we're approaching it. But also I've been in those big change moments and I've tried to instigate big change. And I felt it was like, like you're saying, culture eats strategy for breakfast. I felt it was like the organizations rejected the idea, like like your human body rejects an organ. You know what I mean? Like your what's the right word? But the antibodies come out and they fight against this change, and you can't do anything against that. Does that analogy work for you?
It does. It does, and the body
resists.
That's right. Well, here's and who said this really well years ago, where it was Seth Godin, I think, that talked about this when he talked about when you're and also, by the way, Clayton Christensen talked about this in a different kind of way in Innovator's Dilemma, I think it was, where he talked about the idea of change. When you're presenting change management into an organization, especially when there is a deep set of culture, and culture is just the habits of the way an organization works. So you're in where culture is deeply ingrained and you're introducing change. The better way to do it is to present it as new rather than different, because presenting it as different or a change to the existing people, just exactly to your point, people tend to go, you're suggesting that what we've been doing forever is wrong. Therefore, if what I'm doing is wrong, therefore I'm going to resist this because you're telling me I'm not doing as good a job as I could. And rather saying, no. What you've been doing to date has been fantastic. Everything we've been doing is awesome. We're going to introduce this new way of working and trying this new way of applying whatever it is we're going to do as a means of trying to evolve and grow and become more. And that can actually help that, that sort of knee-jerk rejection of the new organ or rejection of the ideas that it's new, not just changing something that we've been doing forever.
Yeah, absolutely. And the phrase I was thinking of is the immune system of the body, but also it goes back to that age-old thing, isn't it? That people love change. They just don't like it when it happens to them. isn't it? It's,
Yeah.
Right. You've got to sell it. You got to sell it. I think that's great. And I also really like this idea that you create like this North Star, and this is the optimum strategy. In order to get there, we're going to need to tone it down a little. And I like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing though. When you start to look at it and you go, okay, if we just pull out this and this, it's not exactly as we designed it, and it's not quite as elegant, or it's not quite as beautiful, or it's not quite as structured as we'd like it, but it gets us 80% there, 90% there, 70, whatever the right thing is. Yeah. Which, by the way, is one of the things that we talk about a lot when we do what we call story mapping, which is basically looking at a strategy and starting to map out, like, okay, where are the showstoppers? Like, where culturally is this going to be the biggest impediment to actually making this pragmatic? And what we often find is literally just by talking it through, mapping it out, and going, you can identify, like, that one thing in there is the part that everybody's going to get hung up on. Yeah. So if you just pull that out, it's like, okay, it's not optimized anymore, but it is now pragmatic and practical for people won't get hung up on it, and they'll take to it. You can always then later consider if you could add that piece in, like, now can we add this piece in and make it optimal? Or does it work? It doesn't have to be perfect, right? Every business process, every business activity, every business strategy, every single one of them has flaws. Yeah. It's actually easier to design the perfect strategy that has no flaws, that is impossible to accomplish, rather than the flawed strategy that actually works. Yeah. So that's the goal, is to develop a flawed strategy that actually works.
There's so much you could dive into on this, because I think that some people that create strategies, these kind of consultants and people that come in, or even leaders that come in, that pragmatism is the tough bit for them, because that's the compromise they have to make to their big grand vision, right? And that's really hard to do. So I think you're absolutely right here. So if people were to read about how they might create flawed strategies, I'm kidding, where might they find some great content about optimum strategies, mate?
They will find every flaw, crack, and dent in strategy at our wonderful website, which is contentadvisory.net.
Splendid. And when we spin the dial on the interwebs and we're looking for you, where do we find you?
Come listen to my other little podcast. It's called This Old Marketing with my friend Joe Pulizzi. And you can subscribe with your favorite following device at thisoldmarketing.com.
Yes, and you're on YouTube as well. So I think I've
fine, YouTube, YouTube, whatever.
YouTube. Yeah. I tried you on YouTube today, and so I'm trying to vary it up a bit.
So good. I'm a little snarky about it. It was supposed to be. It was supposed to be better than it's turning out. So it's
all these things these days.
Yeah. Well, I mean, given what we talked about last week, and we're supposed to be on YouTube, right? But but here you go. I didn't say I was happy about it. I just said I was doing it, right?
That's it. All right, buddy. And more practically and pragmatically and all the other things, will you be in the bar next week?
Rock around the clock. Yeah, I think we should definitely the sock hop action. I'm digging it. So yeah, of course I'll be in the bar next week. Yeah.
I'll see you then, mate. Thank you very much. All right. Cheers.
Thank you, Robert. I love that point about reaching for the stars for your strategy, but being realistic about the steps you take towards that. So that's a wrap on a slightly longer show this week, episode 231 of the Rockstar CMO effing marketing podcast. I've been your host, Ian Truscott. You can find links to me, Cathy and Robert, along with all the things we discussed in the show notes on rockstarcmo.com, along with our blog, newsletter, and all of our previous episodes. Thank you for dropping a dime into your podcasting jukebox, selecting our track and jiving along with us. I'd love to hear from you, so please say hello or rate or review us in your favourite podcast app, or just keep listening. I'm glad you're here. Next week, Jeff is back and we're going to build an ideal customer profile. And as you heard, Robert will be back in the bar. In the meantime, have a great week And I hope you again join us here next week on Rockstar CMO FM.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Robbie Samuels hosts the On the Schmooze podcast. Robbie, tell listeners what to expect from the show.
Since 2015, I've interviewed entrepreneurs who overcame challenges to achieve success in their field or industry. Tune in to On the Schmooze to listen as I ask deep questions to elicit untold stories about leadership and networking.
And where can people subscribe?
Find the show at ontheschmooze.com or on marketingpodcast.net, or just search for it wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard them. Go subscribe. This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.